the list of countries where non-charitable... So it's rubbish, complete rubbish, the G20 principles. Absolutely unusable. The test I would have as a lawyer is how the hell could I litigate that? You can't. But it was never intended to be anything more than that. They had every opportunity to make it better. Okay, the countries for non-charitable purpose trusts. Not an Isle of Man orientated conversation. BVI, Barbados, Cayman, Cook Islands, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Jersey, Labuan, Mauritius, Niue, Samoa, Turks and Caicos, Delaware, New Hampshire, South Dakota and Wyoming. Scandalous. Yesterday, we had a superb, in my professional opinion as an old bloke, superb presentation from Rasmus Corlin Christensen of the Copenhagen Business School. And he spoke about the technicisation of the sort of work that we're doing. The role of professionals moving policy from societal to the legal and economic sphere. Professionals were able to shape the policy process. Well, no country on earth would invent the non-charitable purpose trust. It takes 2 minutes, except they did. It takes 2 minutes to describe. A trust is a very simple, very strong structure. It's a triangle. I give property to the trustee to hold for the beneficiary. That's all there is to a trust. Hundreds of years of case law. I give property to the trustee to hold for the beneficiary. In the purpose trust, the point I made with my right hand is cut off. There is no beneficiary. By statute, a purpose trust exists only for a non-charitable purpose. That purpose can simply be to hold the shares in a company. What I'm saying about the legislation applies across the whole list of countries that I've just read out. And there are more. New Zealand's toying with the idea at the moment. For the duration of the purpose trust, which in my country is 80 years, but that's really unimportant, no one owns the property that's in it. The legal title is in the trustees, but the trustees are not the beneficial owners. The legislation itself says there can be no beneficial interest whatsoever. So, for example, how would these be used? If you have property put into a purpose trust, it'll be there for 80 years. Whilst it's there, no one owns it. Think of a Montgolfier balloon floating by, but with an empty basket. There's no one in it for 80 years. Why would you do this? Give you an example that is not tax related, but it's a simple example. I explained it to myself, and I have used this as a self-insurance vehicle. And the example is a building company, property company, has a toxic site, a brownfield site. It doesn't want that site on balance sheet. It puts the property into a single purpose vehicle and puts the shares of the single purpose vehicle under a purpose trust. Who owns the single purpose vehicle? No one. Who owns the land? The company. Back to point one. Who owns the company? No one. Bizarre. At a certain point, and the trigger we would use in this example is when the land gets planning permission, it's no longer a brownfield site. It's no longer a risk. At that point, the trust collapses. It ends. It's very important, that point. It has ended. What do you then do with the bits and pieces you've got left? The shares in that company. The trust makes provision for the shares, the surplus assets, to go to a named or individual or company. Surprise, surprise, it's the company that would have owned them if it had wanted to. And so the single purpose vehicle slides back underneath and becomes a subsidiary. That is a legitimate, self-insuring use of non-charitable purpose trusts. What is not legitimate, we've had them since 1996, what is not legitimate is the use of those vehicles to create black holes where there is absolutely no beneficial ownership and no accountability. And they are being sold worldwide as orphan structures. That is the marketing term. If you Google it, all these damn things will come up. Usually non-charitable purpose trusts, but also, as a working example, the Bahamian Enterprise Entity, the B as it's known, the BAA. I've given you one example. In the talk, there are other examples, and I'm practically through, and there are other examples of how a non-charitable purpose trust would be used. But just to read from my conclusions, my time is now over with this talk. How do I sum up what I've said to you? Because I feel extremely passionate about this. As a human rights lawyer and a commercial lawyer, a dichotomy I manage, it's like riding two horses at the same time. The G20 high-level principles are not fit for purpose. They're a paper tiger. They lack specificity as to how to define beneficial ownership, how to gather data, how to disseminate data broadly. They take no account of beneficial ownership avoidance structures, and those structures stop the principles dead in their tracks. Lip service is being paid to these principles in the form of legislation, domestic legislation, which is itself hesitant and incomplete, and seemingly unobserved by the G20, but by no means underutilized. Legislation promoting beneficial ownership avoidance is advancing apace, and not just in the tax havens, as you saw from the list, not just in the micronations. And that advance is going unchallenged. 5 or 6 of my colleagues here in the room had heard of this structure. The rest of you spend your professional lives dealing with issues like this, but you've not been made aware of the very structure which drives a coach and four through the entire thing. They have become, the legislators who are introducing these, and I was having a conversation at lunchtime, legislators who probably haven't the faintest idea what the true purpose of this legislation is in our century, regardless of what its original inspiration was as a self-insurance vehicle. The legislators have themselves become the very agents of obscurity. And I'll leave you with that thought.